Shabbat Shalom. This is Parashah number 39, Hukkat, regulation from Bamidbar Numbers 19:1 through 22:1. Today we're going to examine the Para Adumah from a perspective not recognized by Orthodox Judaism because of their refusal to read and consider the Brit Hadashah, the refreshed, renewed covenant, as part of God's Torah, not a replacement for the Tanakh. Can we keep that down, please? That noise. As Messianic believers, it is not impossible for us to come to understand that the Para Adumah symbolizes Yeshua. This is the presupposition from which we will approach this lesson. And it's important for Messianic believers to understand that our Jewish brethren who do not accept Yeshua as Messiah ben Yosef and as the coming Messiah ben David hold to the idea that this parashah presents what they call a chok, a law that we cannot understand, that even Solomon did not understand. It presents a statute of law that cannot be understood according to this line of thinking. Well, if you don't know Yeshua is the Messiah and you haven't read the New Testament, then you wouldn't know. However, the following comparison supports the comparison of the Para Adumah to Yeshua and his cleansing power for the unclean sinner. Yeshua became sin for us. This concept is illustrated in the preparation of the Para Adumah outside the entire camp, just as Yeshua was crucified outside Jerusalem. This was on Golgotha, called Place of the Skull, a place for impurity. He was exposed to Jew and Gentile alike, an equal opportunity Messiah. Yeshua defined a true Jew in Romans chapters 2 and 3, a status that may be obtained for true believers who are grafted into the covenants of Israel. And let us get back to the qualifications now of the Para Adumah. A true Jew is defined by Yeshua in Romans chapters 2 and 3. I hate it when people say, hey, I lived with some true Jews up in New York, some real Jews. That's faulty thinking. A real Jew is defined by Yeshua in Romans chapters 2 and 3. To begin, the Para Adumah is necessarily a red heifer. The Talmud states that there have been 9 red heifers so far, and that the 10th will be brought by the Messiah himself. This is out of the Talmud now, so you have to consider the validity of this information. All right, it's Orthodox opinion. That is, she's a virgin animal, not ever having been attached to a yoke. That's never having been subject to secular society so that she could act no other way. In the context of Yeshua, he was a virgin, so to speak, never having sinned, and he obediently followed God as would an obedient wife to her husband. He was never yoked to secular authority. He submitted freely. It was not a yoke around him. The Para Adumah did not fight her destiny. Yeshua was without blemish, without sin, and the Para Adumah was also without blemish. According to Jewish law, to be designated a Para Adumah, they can't have more than 2 hairs that aren't red. This signifies a complete blood sacrifice required for redemption of sin, this red. For those who want to explore the rabbinic halakha concerning the Para Adumah, Maimonides codified the entire volume of the Talmud to the qualifications of the Para Adumah. I've gone over some rabbinic laws with you before showing how deep they go. And it's all man's opinion and decisions based on that. So it is with this. There are 15 chapters within the multiple qualifications and restrictions concerning the Para Adumah and the process of slaughtering it. It shouldn't be that hard. It's not. So let's briefly compare the sin of the golden calf to the water used in the sacrifice of the Para Adumah. Both the golden calf and the Para Adumah were burned in fire. The golden calf was crushed to dust, the Para Adumah to dust and ashes. The golden calf's dust was mixed with water. The Para Adumah's ashes were mixed with water. Interestingly, when Yeshua's side was pierced, blood and water ran together. This is of significant import with multiple spiritual applications. There were no ashes as Yeshua was not physically burned. Yet, he was the perfect burnt offering, olah offering, an unblemished burnt offering of total consecration to Yahweh. As 3,000 Jews died because of the golden calf, so too 3 different species, cedar wood, hyssop, and red thread, were burned in the fire of the Parah Adumah. As the golden calf made impure a pure nation, so the Parah Adumah made it impure a pure person who touches it. Similar to God killing those who look upon God's face. Yeshua took the sin of the world, and he became impure according to his definition of impure, as we will discuss shortly. As the golden calf's dust purified the people, when Moshe had the Jews drink the water mixed with its dust, so did the Parah Adumah purify an impure person who voluntarily drinks the water of life, repents, and accepts Yeshua as Moshiach. The sin of the golden calf, representing idolatry, is pervasive to all generations. The cleansing power of the Parah Adumah, Yeshua HaMashiach, is available to anyone who drinks the living water, is redeemed by the blood, and accepts the sacrifice as a reconciliatory path to God. Those are requirements. Our relationship with God is cause and effect. And if, then. We can now understand this is one of the spiritual applications and references to the blood and water that flowed from Yeshua's side. They're both required. Cleansed in the blood, partaking of the water of life. The mitzvah of the Parah Adumah applies that we can be effective witnesses, shining our light forward, as I described to you through my illustrious pictures last night, my wonderful diagrams of the intestinal system.
SpongeBob with an antenna.
SpongeBob with an antenna, yes. Shining our light forward as the temple menorah was designed to do, even outside the camp, in the world of which we are a part. These are the marching orders for true believers, just as it was for the disciples when commissioned to go to the lost sheep of Israel first, and then to the nations. So let's look at the symbolism of those materials: cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and oregano, which is also called hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. I did that twice, sorry about that. Cedar wood is a symbol of endurance and is used as such in the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, an enduring holy place. Our ark is made out of cedar wood here. Conversely, it may represent haughtiness, whereby somebody might think themselves higher or better than others. Therefore, in order to return to God, one must become low, like hyssop, the lowest of all trees, and like the worm from which the scarlet dye is produced. For the attributes of submission and humility are necessary to ascend to God. Hyssop is a symbol of humility and purification. It was used in smearing the blood on the doorposts of the Israelite houses on Pesach. It also symbolizes external truth, which is a means of purification. It was used in cleansing individuals of leprosy and leprosy of internal falsities and evil, lashon hara, those types of things, tatzarat, as were the other two similar materials of cedar wood and scarlet. And it says, the priest shall take for the leper that is to be cleansed 2 living clean birds, and cedar wood and scarlet and hyssop, and shall dip them in the blood of the bird that was killed, and he shall sprinkle upon him that is to be cleansed. The idea of internal cleansing is illustrated in the cleansing of the house of leprosy, if the leprosy be in it. For preparing the water of separation by which cleansing were wrought, cedar wood and hyssop were employed. By cedar wood was signified internal spiritual truth, and by hyssop, external. So the cedar, an interior means of purification, and by hyssop, an external means of purification, inside out. So it works with our bodies, as we talked about last night. intestinal function can determine life or death in our bodies. Death begins in the intestines. Hyssop denotes a means of purification as described in David. Thou shalt purge me with hyssop, and I shall become clean. Thou shalt wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Where to be purged with hyssop and made clean denotes external purification. To be washed and made whiter than snow, internal purification. And whiteness are predictive of truth. It's predicated by truth. Hyssop denotes lowest truth, and cedar, highest truth. And it's evident in 1 Kings 4:33. Solomon spake of woods from the cedar, which is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that goeth out of the wall. Where cedar denotes internal truth, which is of intelligence, and hyssop, external truth, which is not of intelligence. God commands the use of these items so that we can contemplate the necessity of becoming humble in our approach to God and our fellow man. The true and complete rectification for haughtiness as the root and cause for most sins is humility and submission. Pride cometh before a fall, right? People are humbled one way or another. Haughtiness is considered so serious a flaw that it's often likened to idolatry. Therefore, the purification for this attribute must be brought about by humility and modesty in order to undo the damage of pride. A humble spirit can be the vessel to fill our hearts with proper fear and love of God. And humility is manifest when we come to understand our complete and utter dependence on God for every second of every day, for our sustenance. Just look what happens out there when it doesn't rain for a day. The plants wither, they wilt. So do we, without one day of turning to God and depending on Him for our sustenance. We're nothing without Him, and we have nothing without Him. It's through multiple examples of His humility and submission to God as the role of Father that we must learn to emulate His way so that we too can ascend to heaven one day. Did He follow the Old Testament laws for purification according to the Parashah Hukkat, or did He ignore them and consider them abrogated, as so many people are taught today and believe? Since Yeshua came in contact with a dead body, His own, on Nisan 14, He would not have been allowed to enter the earthly nor the heavenly temple. Our Parashah prescribes the cleansing process for one who has touched a dead body or grave. And since Yeshua was unclean because He had come into contact with His own dead body in the grave, we know He had to be sprinkled with the ashes of the Parashah Hukkat and immersed in the mikvah on the 3rd and 7th days. So what's the connection to John 20:17 that takes place when Yeshua came out of the grave on the first day? Yeshua said to Miriam, "Lady, why are you crying? Whom are you looking for?" Thinking it was the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you're the one who carried him away, just tell me where you put him. I'll go and get him myself." And Yeshua said to her, "Miriam." And turning, she cried out to him in Hebrew, "Rabbani." "Stop holding on to me," Yeshua said to her, "because I haven't gone back to the Father." He was not clean at that time. What does ascending to my Father have to do with the Torah requirements? Nowhere does it say a man must ascend to God before he can be touched. John 20:25 takes place in the evening on the same day. Yeshua has not ascended to heaven and has not yet been purified. Thomas said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger into the place where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I refuse to believe it." Notice Yeshua does not invite him to touch him at that point. John 20:26 picks up a week later, 7 days. A week later, his Talmidim were once more in the room, and this time Thomas was with him. Although the doors were locked, Yeshua came, stood among them, and said, "Shalom Aleichem." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, look at my hands, take your hand and put it into my side." Why did he make him wait a week before allowing him to touch his side? Death requires the ashes of the Parah Adumah and mikvah immersion on the 3rd and 7th day according to the Torah. This washing for death and by intimation for sleep is also found in 1 Thessalonians. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Moshiach shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall ever be with the Lord. The word heaven in Hebrew is shamayim, indicating a combination of fire and water. This implies God made the firmament from a combination of fire and water, two opposite elements, which only God can subdue and use simultaneously. Passing through the 7 heavens is the reality typified by the ashes of the Parah Adumah, which are mixed with water and sprinkled on those who have come in contact with the dead or with the grave. When Yeshua died, both his body and spirit were unclean because of death. But as he ascended through the heavens to present himself to the Father, the heavens, Shamayim, themselves acted as the waters of purification of the Parah Adumah, which consists as well of fire and water mixed together. So passing through the 7 heavens is the same as being sprinkled by the ashes of the Parah Adumah. After the sprinkling with the ashes, the one who came in contact with the dead must be immersed in the mikvah. Once more in John 20:26, we see Yeshua invited Thomas to touch him as he was now clean. Something had to happen. His obedience to the Mosaic law should clarify its applicability in New Testament times beyond any doubt. Even the most staunch Orthodox believer can relate to the Torah, the Tanakh, and see that Yeshua, whether they want to acknowledge him or not, went through that Old Testament process. It's required. It will happen. As we ascend to heaven during the rapture, those who will be raptured, those who are sealed, hopefully me, among them, have to wait. Our Haftarah, Shoftim and Judges, 11:1 through 33. This Haftarah describes how the Israelites were attacked by the Ammonites. The Ammonites were descendants of Lot's second son, and Molech was their idol. Jephthah's response to the impending attack is an example of how we should handle conflict. See, when you study this, you learn how to do what you need to do. He first sent a missive to Ammon, declaring peaceful intentions. However, he also mentioned how the Israelites conquered Sichon and Og, mentioned in our Parashah. Jephthah, the Gileadite, was the son of a prostitute. He fled from his home because of his siblings' complaints that they would not inherit anything because of his birth status. He settled in the land of Tov. Tov means good, by the way, where he grew into a great warrior simply from experience with raiding with some of his friends. When the Ammonite nation attacked the people of Israel, Jephthah was the one the Israelites came running to lead them to battle. Oh, now they want him. You know, that reminds me of something that happened this week at home. I had a carpet company, I will not mention because this is videoed, come out and do some extensive remodeling on my floor. This happened several years ago. Well, over the last couple years, the vinyl on one of the floors started curling up along the edge, along the walls. So I called them and had them come out and say, what would you charge to re-glue this? Well, they said, gave me a figure, and I said, okay, schedule me. They scheduled me. The day they were supposed to come out, they never came out. They never called. Nothing. Nothing for weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, after the new year, then they called and said, you know, I'm so sorry, we've been really busy, and we'd like to reschedule you. And I said, you know, we'll talk about it later. I said, right now, you know, I'm busy. So just this last week, they called again. And they said that they had found that this job was on their books, and they hadn't done it, and they had been too busy, and wanted to know if I still wanted them to come out. And I thought to myself, if that floor was curling up to a cigar shape, I would not call them out. I bought my own stuff at Home Depot, and I'm going to do it myself. And I will learn from the experience of doing it myself. I can't tell you what it's going to look like when it's done, but it will be flat on the floor. I just have to make sure all my animals are accounted for to make sure I didn't glue them down too. Jephthah agreed to lead them based on their offer to make him the leader of Gilead if he agreed. He agrees, and God honored his peaceful attempt to resolve the conflict by allowing the Israelites under Jephthah's command to eliminate the Ammonites. So see, the righteousness of one person can do a lot for others. The prayer of a righteous person can do a lot for those for whom they are praying. Unfortunately, Jephthah also vowed to Adonai, this is sad, if the Ammonites were delivered unto him, he would sacrifice whatever came out of his doors to greet him upon his return to Adonai as a burnt offering. His only daughter and child was the first one. She told Jephthah, this shows her righteousness, okay, to keep his vow to Adonai, but that she wanted to go away into the mountains with her friends for 2 months and mourn, as she would die unmarried. She went away for 2 months, and as a God-fearing young woman, she returned as promised, and Jephthah sacrificed her as he vowed to Adonai. Subsequently, it became a law in Israel that the women of Israel would go every year for 4 days to lament the daughter of Jephthah from Gilead. This action describes this father's obedience to God and the seriousness of a vow. It also describes a child's obedience to her father even unto her death, not unlike the willingness of Yeshua to obey his father's will. How sad. But look at this love for God on the part of the father and the daughter. In this case, the daughter was sacrificed. In the case of Abraham and Isaac, God spared the son. So we have no room to complain. None at all. Our Brit Kadashah, John 3:9 through 21. I want to focus on verses 13 and 15 for a moment. That says, no one has gone up into heaven. There is only the one who has come down from heaven, the Son of Man. Just as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that everyone who trusts in him may have eternal life. May, not will. Our first question would naturally be why. Some of you already know this. Why would we look up to a snake? Now think about what we've previously covered in this lesson. He became sin for us, unclean in spirit and body until he ascended in heaven. In our Parashah, God tells Moshe that anyone who has been bitten and looks up to the snake on the pole will remain alive. According to the apocryphal book, Wisdom of Solomon, which says that the serpent served as a lesson and symbol, he who turned toward it was saved, not by what he saw, but by you, Savior of all. And the Mishnah, this is contained in the Talmud, teaches, could the serpent slay or the serpent keep alive? It is rather to teach you that when the Israelites directed their thoughts toward God on high and kept their thoughts in subjection to God, Yahweh, they were healed. Otherwise they perished. The lesson for us is that even we must actively trust in Yeshua and keep our eyes on him, even when we're in the midst of being bitten, in whatever form or fashion that may be, and however long it may be. We've got to keep our eyes on the prize and keep running to win the race. It's not enough to wear the life jacket and stand at the edge of the pool. Now we've got to take it off and jump wholeheartedly into the Father's arms. Shabbat Shalom. If you would like more information, you can go to our website at rabdavis.org, and we have lots of information, previous teachings, and information that you can contact me on with any questions. Thank you.